Today, we're digging into something that's been making headlines. All that buzz about the FBI warning us that, well, our everyday texting is kind of, sort of, really vulnerable.
Yeah, that's a pretty big deal.
It is, especially because, the FBI is also pushing for this whole responsibly managed encryption thing for, like, all the popular messaging apps. It's kind of like, security experts are telling us to use these apps, the encrypted ones, but then the FBI is like, hold on, we need to tweak those a bit.
Yeah.
It's a little confusing, to say the least. What's the deal with all of this?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. It's a bit of a paradox, right?
Eh.
The FBI wants changes to address these concerns that came up after a recent cyber attack on U.S. telco networks.
Wait, so you mean like hackers got into the actual phone networks?
Yeah. This attack, they're calling it Salt Typhoon, and it looks like it's linked to Chinese hackers. It really showed just how, well, exposed our communications could be.
So, like, what were they after? What kind of data was at risk?
Well, the thing is, the Salt Typhoon attack targeted the core of our communications. It exposed a weakness that a lot of people don't even think about, which is the lack of encryption in, our standard text messaging.
So you're saying all those texts we send, they're basically, like, open for anyone to read?
Pretty much, yeah.
Right.
Unlike encrypted messaging apps, like WhatsApp or Signal, those kind of things, traditional SMS and RCS texting, it sends your messages as plain text. So yeah, they're pretty easy to intercept if someone knows what they're doing.
Wow, okay. I had no idea it was that vulnerable. So that's why the FBI is saying we should switch to encrypted messaging apps.
Exactly. Those apps offer end-to-end encryption. So only the people sending and receiving the messages can actually read them. Even the companies who run the apps can't see what's being said.
That makes sense. But you said the FBI wants something called responsibly managed encryption. So what is that exactly?
Well, in essence, it means the FBI wants tech companies to be able to give law enforcement access to those encrypted messages, but only, of course, when they have a lawful court order.
I see. So they're saying they need to be able to access those messages to investigate crimes.
Right. They argue that being locked out of encrypted communications makes it way harder to solve serious crimes.
But wouldn't that create a backdoor that hackers could exploit? Like, wouldn't that defeat the whole purpose of encryption in the first place?
That's precisely what a lot of privacy advocates are worried about. People like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they say that any backdoor, no matter how well-intentioned it is, it weakens security for everyone.
It sounds like a really tough balancing act. So the FBI wants to be able to do their job, but compromising encryption could, well, put everyone at risk, right?
Exactly. It's really a complex issue with, strong arguments on both sides.
Yeah.
Even FBI Director Christopher Wray has talked about this, how there's this danger of going dark, losing access to evidence that could be crucial to solving crimes.
So going dark is basically like law enforcement being completely shut out from any encrypted communication.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. But, weakening encryption also have huge implications for us, for everyday users, for our privacy. What's to stop, like, this access from being misused, for things like surveillance?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Any system with a back door, even if it's meant for, lawful access, it's inherently more vulnerable. It's like, I don't know, like having a secret entrance to a bank vault. Even if only authorized people are supposed to use it, it still increases the risk of, well, a break-in.
That's a great analogy. So where do companies like Apple, Google, and Meta stand on all of this? Are they on board with this whole responsibly managed encryption idea?
So far, they've been pretty committed to end-to-end encryption. Their argument is that if you weaken encryption for anyone, you weaken it for everyone. And they emphasize that, user privacy is paramount.
Especially these days with how much of our lives are online.
Exactly. And Meta actually specifically pointed out that the Salt Typhoon attack is a prime example of why strong encryption is so vital.
It's kind of like they're saying, we told you so, huh?
Yeah, kind of.
It makes sense, but I wonder if the FBI will push back on this, with the tech companies taking such a strong stance.
Oh, I'd say it's highly likely. They've been pretty vocal about the need for access, for lawful access. I don't see them backing down anytime soon. This debate is a long way from over. It's this clash between two really fundamental values, security and privacy.
Right, and it's not an easy one to resolve. And speaking of privacy, let's talk about Telegram. A lot of people think of it as the privacy app, like a haven for people who really want to keep their conversations secure. But I read this article in the Financial Times, and they described Telegram as both this huge social media giant and the new dark web. Those seem like, well, they're kind of contradictory labels, aren't they? What's the real story with Telegram?
Yeah, Telegram's reputation for privacy is, well, it's interesting because it's not entirely accurate. Unlike some of the other apps out there, Telegram doesn't have end-to-end encryption turned on by default.
Really?
Yeah, you actually have to enable it yourself manually for each conversation.
So people who are using Telegram for privacy, they might not actually be getting what they think they are.
Unfortunately, that's the case. They do market themselves as this super secure platform, but, well, their default settings aren't as private as a lot of people believe.
Wow. Well, it's misleading, to say the least. And I guess it kind of explains why Telegram has become so popular in some places, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, the Korea Times reported this surge in Telegram's popularity in Korea because people were afraid of government censorship, with talks of martial law. People flocked to Telegram because they thought it was super private, but, well, that wasn't necessarily true.
So Telegram's growing because people believe it's secure, even though it's not as private as it seems.
It really highlights the importance of doing your research, not just going by reputation. Digital security is, well, that's complicated. And it's crucial to understand the specifics of each platform before you trust them with your private conversations.
That's a good point. And speaking of complicated, there's another twist to the Telegram story, isn't there? Their CEO, Pavel Durov, he was arrested in France. And after that, Telegram completely changed their stance on cooperating with authorities. They started handing over user data, monitoring content, which is like a 180 from their previous privacy stance.
You're absolutely right, and it gets even more interesting when you consider why they can do that monitoring. Because they don't have that full end-to-end encryption turned on by default. It's ironic, Telegram's supposed strength, their resistance to government interference, was actually based on a security weakness.
This is getting pretty wild. So Telegram, the app that was once like the poster child for privacy, is now more aligned with what the FBI wants than the companies the FBI is trying to pressure.
Yeah, it's a fascinating parallel. Telegram's in this position where they can provide user data while companies like Apple and Meta are pushing back against those very requests.
Yeah.
It really makes you think.
It does. We've got the FBI pushing for change, tech giants holding their ground, and Telegram caught somewhere in the middle. Is anyone actually doing anything concrete to address all these vulnerabilities, in our communication system?
Actually, yes. Senator Ron Wyden has proposed some new legislation. It's specifically designed to, well, strengthen the cybersecurity of U.S. telecom networks. Remember, that Salt Typhoon attack, it exploited weaknesses in those networks themselves.
Right. So instead of just focusing on the encryption of messages, this is going after the foundation, the networks themselves.
Exactly. This Secure American Communications Act, it would force telecom companies to go through annual cybersecurity assessments, have independent audits, and then report all their findings to the FCC.
That sounds like a step in the right direction for sure. Does this new legislation have any support?
Yeah, it does. Consumer Reports is backing it pretty strongly. They're saying it's long overdue, especially given how vulnerable U.S. communication networks are. And Senator Wyden has actually been a longtime advocate for cybersecurity. He even proposed legislation before to make the government itself adopt secure communication software.
So he's learned from past missteps, like that whole thing with Zoom overstating their security features.
It seems like he's taking a more holistic approach now, trying to create a more secure and, well, transparent communication ecosystem.
That's a good thing, for sure. This has been a lot to process. We've covered how vulnerable traditional texting is, the FBI's push for this responsibly managed encryption, and then Telegram's, interesting position. What does this all mean for, the average person? What should people be doing to protect their privacy and security online?
I think the most important takeaway is awareness. Understanding the trade-offs, the risks, the different levels of security that each platform offers, that's crucial. Like, if you're still using SMS for sensitive conversations, it's definitely time to switch to an app that has end-to-end encryption.
So ditch the old school texts and go for a more secure app.
Exactly.
But even with those apps, it's not just about blindly trusting the big names, right? Like we saw with Telegram.
Oh, absolutely not. Popularity doesn't equal security. Doing your research, reading reviews, understanding the specific features of each app, that's all vital. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. But being informed, that's what gives you the power to make the best choice for your own privacy needs.
So it's about picking the right app and knowing how to use it properly, making sure you're actually getting the level of security you want.
Exactly. Digital security is a shared responsibility. We need individuals to be proactive, but companies and governments also need to implement robust security measures and, actually advocate for user privacy.
Speaking of responsibility, what about that legislation from Senator Wyden to secure the networks themselves? That seems like a step in the right direction, but, How much of an impact could it really have?
It's definitely a significant step towards building a more secure foundation for, well, for all digital communication. Think of it like reinforcing the walls of a house. It doesn't just protect individual rooms, it strengthens the entire structure. And, well, the fact that it has support from organizations like Consumer Reports, that really adds weight to the argument that, this type of legislation is way overdue.
It's a good reminder that we don't have to just accept things as they are. We can actually demand better from the companies and institutions that control our data.
Absolutely. We can hold them accountable for implementing strong security practices, and, we can advocate for policies that protect our privacy.
This has been incredibly insightful, but I have to admit, it's a lot to take in. It feels like this constant game of cat and mouse. Hackers find a vulnerability, security experts patch it, and then hackers just find another way in. Will we ever truly be ahead of the game?
It's a valid concern, for sure. Cybersecurity is constantly evolving, and so are the threats. But that doesn't mean we should just give up or accept being vulnerable. By staying informed, being proactive, and advocating for strong security measures, we can make a difference.
It sounds like you're saying being informed is half the battle. The more we understand these issues, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves and, well, demand better security.
Exactly. It's like an arms race, but instead of weapons, we're using knowledge.
That's a powerful way to put it. But even with the best intentions and the most up-to-date information, it feels like a lot of responsibility falls on individuals. Shouldn't there be, more safeguards at a systemic level?
You're absolutely right. It shouldn't be solely up to individuals to navigate this complex landscape. Organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they're fighting for user privacy. Lawmakers like Senator Wyden are pushing for better cybersecurity. And let's not forget all the security experts and researchers working behind the scenes to keep our data safe. They all play a vital role.
So it's a collective effort. We all have a part to play in shaping the future of digital security and privacy.
Absolutely. The more we understand the issues, the more empowered we are to make good choices and advocate for a digital world that's both secure and respects our privacy.
This conversation has been really enlightening, but we've really only scratched the surface. I'm sure our listeners are eager to delve deeper into some of these issues.
That's what's so great about these deep dives. They spark curiosity and encourage people to explore further. There are tons of resources out there, online and in libraries, for anyone who wants to keep learning.
We'll be sure to include some links in the show notes. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we talked about earlier, this tension between security and privacy. It feels like a fundamental dilemma, one that doesn't have an easy answer.
It's a question that's been around for ages, really. And the digital age has just made it even more complex and, well, more important. We want to be safe from hackers, cyber criminals, all that. But we also value our privacy. We don't want to live in a world where we're constantly being watched.
It's like walking a tightrope between two things that are both really important. How do we find that balance, that sweet spot where we can have both without sacrificing one for the other?
There's no easy answer. It's an ongoing conversation, a negotiation between competing interests. But I think open dialogue, thoughtful debate, and a commitment to finding solutions that respect both security and privacy, those are essential. We can't let fear make our choices for us or allow ourselves to be lulled into a false sense of security.
So it's about finding a middle ground, a way forward that acknowledges how complex this issue is and tries to address both sides.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that security and privacy aren't actually opposites. They're two sides of the same coin. We need both to thrive in the digital age.
And I think it's important to remember that this whole debate about responsibly managed encryption, it's just one part of a much bigger picture. We haven't even touched on things like data breaches, online tracking, facial recognition, all that.
You're right. This conversation is just the tip of the iceberg. The digital world is constantly changing, and with it, the challenges to our security and privacy.
So it's not just about picking the right messaging app or supporting certain laws. It's about staying vigilant, staying informed, and demanding better from the companies and institutions that, well, they hold our data.
Well said. It's about taking an active role in shaping the digital world we want, a world where security and privacy aren't seen as being at odds, but as essential parts of a truly empowering and freeing online experience.
That's a powerful vision. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And as always, stay curious.
And stay informed. And we're back, diving deeper into the world of encryption and messaging.
Before the break, we were talking about, well, this idea of interoperability between different messaging platforms. It sounds pretty amazing, to be honest, being able to send encrypted messages to anyone, no matter what app they're using. Is that even possible, like practically speaking?
It's definitely gaining momentum.
Yeah.
In fact, the EU is pushing for it with their Digital Markets Act. They're really trying to break down these walled gardens, that exist between different messaging platforms.
So instead of having like a separate app for every group of friends or colleagues, we could all communicate seamlessly and securely. That sounds, well, kind of revolutionary.
It would be a game changer for sure. Not only would it make communication easier, but it would also tackle some of those security concerns we've been discussing. Think about it. If all the major platforms could send and receive messages securely, we wouldn't be stuck relying on those, well, outdated and vulnerable texting methods like SMS and RCS.
And that would make those Salt Typhoon type attacks way harder to pull off.
That's exactly. Interoperability could be a big win for both security and convenience. It's not a silver bullet, but it's a promising step towards a messaging ecosystem that's more robust and, well, more private.
I'm curious, though, have any companies actually made any progress in this area? Is interoperability even technically possible with end-to-end encryption?
It's a tough challenge, but
Yeah.
Meta has actually made some interesting progress. They've figured out a way to implement end-to-end encryption in some cases, even when they don't control both sides of the conversation.
Wait, so even if someone's using a different platform that isn't fully end-to-end encrypted, they could still receive a secure message from someone on a Meta app?
Yeah,
That's impressive. It seems like we're on the verge of like a fundamental shift in how we communicate online.
the potential is huge. Imagine a world where privacy and security are just built into the very foundation of our digital interactions. That's the driving force behind this push for interoperability.
It's a pretty exciting vision for sure. But let's, come back down to earth for a minute. We've covered a lot of ground today. The vulnerability of our everyday texting, this whole debate about responsibly managed encryption, and then Telegram's, unexpected journey. For the average person listening, what's the most important thing to take away from all of this? What should they be doing to, actually protect their privacy and security online?
The most important thing I'd say is awareness. Understanding those trade-offs, the potential risks, the different levels of security offered by different platforms, that's crucial. Like if you're still using SMS for sensitive conversations, it's definitely time to switch to an app that has end-to-end encryption.
So step one, ditch those old text messages and go for a more secure app.
Yeah.
But even with those apps, it's not just about, blindly trusting the big names. Like we saw with
Right.
Telegram, popularity doesn't always mean security.
Absolutely. Do your research, read reviews, understand the specific features of each app. There's no magic solution, but being informed, that's what empowers you to make the right choice for your own needs.
So it's about picking the right app, Andy, knowing how to use it properly, making sure you're getting the level of security you expect.
Right. Digital security is a shared responsibility. Individuals need to be proactive for sure, but companies and governments, they also need to step up, implement strong security measures, and advocate for user privacy.
Speaking of which, what about that legislation from Senator Wyden, the one that's aimed at securing the actual networks themselves? That seems like a good step, but how much of an impact could it actually have?
It's a significant step towards building a more secure foundation for, well, for all digital communications, like, as I said before, reinforcing the walls of a house.
Yeah.
And having the support of groups like Consumer Reports, that really lends weight to the argument that this kind of legislation is, well, it's way overdue.
It shows that we don't have to just accept things as they are. We can demand better from the companies, the institutions that control our data.
Absolutely. We can hold them accountable for implementing good security practices and support policies that actually protect our privacy.
This has been really eye-opening, but I have to admit, it's a little overwhelming. It feels like a constant game of catch-up. Hackers find a weakness, security experts patch it, and then the hackers just find another way in. Will we ever really be ahead of the curve?
It's a valid concern, definitely. Cybersecurity is constantly evolving, and the threats are always changing. But that doesn't mean we should give up or just resign ourselves to being vulnerable. By staying informed, being proactive, and supporting strong security measures, we can make a difference.
So knowledge is power, in a way. The more we understand these issues, the better we can protect ourselves.
Exactly. It's an arms race, but the weapons are knowledge, not bombs and bullets.
That's a great way to think about it. But even with the best intentions and all the information in the world, it still feels like a lot of responsibility is placed on us, on individuals. Shouldn't there be more safeguards at a higher level?
You're right. It shouldn't be solely up to individuals to navigate this whole thing. Organizations like the Electronic Frontier Foundation, they're doing great work fighting for user privacy. Lawmakers like Senator Wyden are pushing for better cybersecurity legislation. And let's not forget all the security experts and researchers who are working behind the scenes to keep our data safe. They're all playing a crucial role.
So it's a team effort. We all have a part to play in shaping the future of digital security and privacy.
Absolutely. And the more we understand the issues, the more empowered we are to make informed choices and advocate for a digital world that's both secure and respects our privacy.
This conversation has been, well, incredibly enlightening, but we've really only just scratched the surface. I'm sure our listeners are going to want to dig into some of these issues even further.
That's what's so great about these deep dives. They spark curiosity and, well, encourage people to explore further. There are tons of resources out there, online and in libraries, for anyone who wants to keep learning.
And we'll definitely include some links in the show notes for folks who want to do some follow-up research. But before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier. That tension between security and privacy, it feels like, I don't know, a fundamental dilemma, one that doesn't have an easy solution.
It's a question that people have been wrestling with for ages. And the digital age has only made it more complex and, well, more important. We want to be safe from hackers and all that, but we also value our privacy. We don't want to live in a world where we're constantly being watched.
Right, it's like trying to balance two things that are both really crucial. How do we find that sweet spot where we can have both without having to sacrifice one for the other?
There's no easy answer. It's a constant conversation, a balancing act between different interests. But I think having an open dialogue, having these debates, and committing to finding solutions that respect both security and privacy, those are all essential. We can't let fear drive our decisions or be lulled into a false sense of security, thinking everything's fine when it's not.
So it's about finding a middle ground, a path forward that acknowledges how complex this issue is and tries to address both sides.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that security and privacy aren't opposites. They're two sides of the same coin. We need both to thrive in this digital world.
And this whole debate about responsibly managed encryption, it's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. We haven't even touched on things like, data breaches, online tracking, facial recognition, all of that.
You're absolutely right. This is just the tip of the iceberg. The digital landscape is always changing, and so are the challenges to our security and privacy.
So it's not just about picking the right messaging app or supporting certain laws. It's about staying informed, being proactive, and, well, demanding better from the companies and institutions that control our data.
Well said. It's about taking an active role in shaping the digital world we want to live in, one where security and privacy aren't seen as conflicting forces, but as essential parts of an online experience that's both empowering and freeing.
That's a vision worth striving for. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, and as always, stay curious.
And stay informed.
It's a tall order for sure, imagining this digital world where security and privacy are, well, just built in from the start. It's like asking us to, I don't know, picture a city that's designed for both safety and freedom,
Yeah.
like with well-lit streets, but also like secret gardens hidden away.
It's a complex challenge, for sure, but not an impossible one. We already see glimpses of it, in certain aspects of technology, like these privacy-focused design principles that are gaining traction.
So the idea is, instead of just adding on privacy features as an afterthought, you'd have those considerations, baked into the very core of how things are built.
Exactly. Think about how architects design buildings. They want them to be functional, but also aesthetically pleasing. We need that kind of thinking, that holistic approach applied to the digital world. We can't treat security and privacy as separate issues.
Yeah, they need to work together seamlessly. But how do we actually get there? It seems like, I don't know, such a huge undertaking, especially, all the different interests and everyone pulling in different directions.
It's not going to happen overnight, that's for sure. It requires a real shift in mindset, both from the people creating these technologies and the people using them.
So it's a two-way street. We can't just sit back and wait for, tech companies or governments to hand us this perfect digital world where everything's secure and private.
You got it. We, as users, have a responsibility to educate ourselves, to be aware of the choices we make online, and to demand better from those companies, the ones we entrust with our data.
So it's not just about choosing the right app or supporting the right laws. It's about actively shaping the digital world we want to live in.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have agency, that our choices actually matter. And by working together, we can create a digital future that, well, actually reflects our values.
Well said. This deep dive has been, well, a real eye-opener. But I hope it's left you with, a sense of hope, not just doom and gloom.
Oh, absolutely. Even small actions can make a difference. Choosing a more secure app, supporting legislation that, strengthens cybersecurity, or even just having conversations like this one, they can all contribute to a more secure and privacy-respecting digital world.
It's a good reminder that we're not helpless, in the face of these challenges. We can all play a part in shaping that digital future.
And that future is still being written. We have the opportunity to create a digital world where security and privacy aren't seen as these opposing forces, but as essential parts of a truly empowering and, well, freeing online experience.
That's a vision worth fighting for sure. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And as always, stay curious.
And stay informed. It's been great chatting with you.
And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time for another deep dive.